Well, hello and welcome, or welcome back to Read Backup, for my weekly catch-up on everything I've read, everything that I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading. I did finish some stuff this week. It's not quite the stuff I had intended, but we made great progress on the big chunky books I was meaning to finish, so that's all good. I think we're on track for what I was hoping for in wrapping up this month. So I finished a couple of things. The first one I finished on audio was Oleander's Sword by Tasha Suri. And this is the second in, I think, a trilogy, maybe more than that. But there are 2 books out now. So the third is coming out in, I believe, the end of the year. And hopefully, because I don't want to wait too long, basically. I enjoyed it so much. Oleander's Sword, the second book, really built on the story from the first. So I can't tell you too much because it is the second book. So the first book, I will say, is this kind of sweeping high fantasy in a very loosely South Asian inspired world. It's got a lot of nature magic to it, and I love that that grew as a more prominent element in the second book. And I love that we have a very wide cast, but we're kind of focused in on these 2 women who are, over the course of the story, we know there's going to be a sapphic element, so they're in love. Obviously, there's also a lot of politics in this story, so it's a very political conflict driven high fantasy story. I wouldn't say it's epic fantasy. It's not necessarily world ending stakes. There is some major stuff going on. We learned very early in the first book that there's this kind of magical plague called the rot going around that's sort of to do with this nature magic, and so that has continued to be an element. But really mainly it's all this political conflict. So if you like kind of non-traditional fantasy, this has a lot of fresh elements in terms of the magic system and very politically focused fantasy. This is a great series for you to get into now, especially with a sequel coming up soon. So what I liked about this book, trying to keep it kind of vague, is actually something I really enjoyed from the Daevabad series. So if you've read and liked Daevabad, I think the structuring and how the story unfolds, not in terms of the actual plot, but in terms of progression of the characters, is very similar. So in book 1, we had 2 main characters who were very, very young and unsure of themselves. They're kind of trying to find their footing, and that's the same for the first book of Daevabad. And many people kind of liken it to YA or say it's a crossover, and I think that's probably true here. There are some coming of age elements, but I would definitely not call either of these series YA overall. I think for sure these girls early on were late teens coming into adulthood. Now here in the second book, we have seen them sort of transition into finding their position, their place in power in this world, and recognizing, or sort of coming out of that unsurety that they had in the first book of finding their footing. So they very much now are in these roles where they're influential. They've sort of moved away from each other. They've gained independence somewhat, but still remain very reliant on each other because they care about each other, not because they're trying to keep each other together. They're going off and doing their own thing in a lot of ways. So I love that aspect to it. And we saw that in Daevabad as well, where Nari, the main character there, and Priya and Malini here are both kind of finding their way magically, as well as in these power roles as key players in this political turmoil. So that I think was great. In Daevabad, we saw Nari really figure out what she wanted to do with her future in book 2, and I think that kind of comes about here with this series with Malini and Priya. So I think that was fabulous. The side characters here, there are a lot of still perspective characters. We get a very wide scope of perspective characters, but the side characters feel very fleshed out because they're perspective characters still, but they feel secondary to kind of the 2 main characters, to me at least. And I loved attaching to those characters. They definitely have a gray morality to them, I think, where we see the conflicts internally play out over the course of this story, because there isn't really a heroic good versus evil. Because it's such a political story, there's a lot more variance in, do I do what's right for my people, or do I do what's kind of right on the larger scale? What are the detrimental effects that could be played out because of the choices that I make, is a really big theme to this series. So I think that give and take of doing the thing you think is maybe right but might be actually harmful is a really key element. And I love those conversations of the difficulties of that decision making. So I am just so looking forward to the third book. As I said, I think I liked the second book in the series even more than the first, and I just cannot wait to see where this goes. This also has that real non-traditional magic. I think I already mentioned. I love that with David as well. So here, I think we get even more growth of the magic in this second book, where in David Bad, there's kind of the main character has this prominent healing magic, but it's sort of underdeveloped. So if you felt like you liked that magical aspect and kind of non-traditional magic, here you get a lot more of that. So I was so thrilled that actually played in this story. So I think that's it for Oleander Sword. So I'm finished up with that one, thank goodness. And I really was happy to wrap that one up. The next book that I read was kind of impromptu, but not really impromptu, because it was on my TBR and I had a planned buddy read, but I pretty much just grabbed it at the library when I saw it and brought it home because I knew I needed to read it. So I immediately got into and devoured The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna, and very appropriately, it's blurbed by Tasha Suri. It's a perfect fit. This one was not what I expected at all. I think I would say this is one to go to if you want a house in the Cerulean Sea, but with less drama and less serious content and more romance. This very much felt like that to me. So this is all about witches in England, and the witches there are not allowed to be together, really, because of a massive curse that will kind of do them harm if too many witches are together. So they are very solitary people. But we learn at the very beginning that they do come together occasionally, very rarely, into this society of irregular witches, right? So we know there is kind of a community there, but it's very disjointed. But this book is not about that. And that's kind of the thing that let me down on this, because I was hoping we were going to have this group of witches coming together and rallying, and that was what the title was implying, but that's not really the story. The story here is about a single witch, Amika, who winds up kind of finding her place in the world by making YouTube videos pretending to do magic and be witchy in these sort of cozy witchy core community on YouTube. And I love that, obviously. I love YouTube and BookTube, and that sounds like a great fun idea, doing this witchy cottagecore sort of thing. But she's pretending to do magic while actually doing magic, and somebody kind of catches on to that, but not for nefarious purposes. This person is looking for someone who is an actual witch and spots her as a potential actual witch, because there is this ragtag group of adults at this manor house in the country who are there taking care of 3 young girls who are all witches. They've been collected by a very unusual woman who travels the world and occasionally collects children who are orphaned. Witches are always orphaned, as we find out early in this book. And she has brought these 3 witchy children to this manor house in secret, and they've been getting raised there for years, but now their magic is kind of outgrowing them. They can't really control it, and so they need someone to teach them. So this group of adults who are very quirky, found family-ish, groundskeeper and his partner, who kind of is the chef and sort of handyman of the manor, the housekeeper, and oddly a librarian who takes care of the rare book collection at this manor house and occasionally loans them out, and is very curmudgeonly. And so these adults have been caring for these kids and very much love them and act as this found family, and that is the most heartwarming, wonderful part of this story. But there's also, of course, the romance, because Mika naturally, as we can figure out, agrees to show up at this house after they reach out to her, and kind of checks things out and realizes, wow, these girls are really out of control magically and they really do need my help. And they're kind of up against a timeline. Naturally, one of the people in this house is sort of a matchmaker and spies that the curmudgeonly librarian and the witch maybe have a little little spark, or could have a little spark if pushed. And so this becomes the slow pushing of them together. They do kind of naturally have vibes with each other, but it is that grumpy sunshine romance. It's got very much cozy found family vibes, and it's very slow moving as a story. So there's not a lot that happens in the plot, even though they have this deadline and timeline to helping out the girls and learning to control their magic. There's not a lot of threat to it. So as I said up front, I really think if you liked House in the Cerulean Sea and want kind of a lighter version of that, this would be a great one to pick up. For me, it didn't work quite as good because I think what does make House in the Cerulean Sea so strong is that it doesn't shy away from those really hard topics. This one has some hard stuff in the backstories of the characters, but it doesn't really make that prominent or engage with those topics massively. It's background mainly. So this is a very light, easy read. It's so cozy, and the romance, it's slow to get going, but it's prominent. So I would call this kind of a paranormal romance story. It's in a contemporary setting rather than historical. So there are things, really cute things, like Mika having a car she calls Broomstick, and she can go speedier than it is actually possible through her magic. Just little quirky, special elements like that aren't really there for any reason other than to flavor the text for us and give us those cozy vibes. So I really liked that. I think it's not going to be super memorable, but I obviously am someone who's been very into the cozy fantasy movement and genre growth. And so I'm super happy to have picked this up and be supporting that genre growing even more and continuing to bring out more books. So yeah, this was very lovely. The last thing that I finished this week was a poetry collection, but I DNF'd it. And it's the Heiress / Ghost Acres by Lightsey Darst. And I think this is two separate poetry collections because it's kind of separated into, the first half is the Heiress and the second half is the Ghost Acres, and I only read the Heiress part and stopped there. Or I kind of skimmed through and just read the poems that caught my eye. I predicted in my haul of this recently that I probably would not like it, and that weighed out. I did try to read the poems that grabbed my eye. There were some that really had great sentiments and were well written. There was nothing strange about the poetry too much to make it unreadable, so this definitely was readable to me as a non-poetry reader. I just wasn't really behind the sentiment. A lot of these were about motherhood, and many of them had sort of ideals that didn't jive with me at all. And then there were other aspects, not to do with motherhood at all, but kind of the perspective used that made me a little uncomfortable coming from the author. I'm not sure, but needless to say, I just really didn't have anything drawing me to continue on. So that was it. So it's going to go to my little free library shortly. And it's a short little poetry collection, so I didn't spend too much time on it at all. I'm going to hold up my books that I've been holding up every week. Again, Babel and Byzantium, my two big, chunky books. So Babel, I mentioned last week, the goal is to get this one done at the end of this week. Or not the end of this week, the end of this month. And I'm perfectly on track to get that done. So I got a lot of substantial progress, and I think I can finish it this weekend before the month is out. It is a 3-day weekend in the US, so yay for holiday weekend reading. And Byzantium, this one's over 800 pages, so I've been slowly crawling through this one, and that's fine. I'm not in any rush. But I kind of was feeling vibes to start all of the things. So what did I start this week? From my mini TBRs, I started Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and you can see I'm a decent chunk of the way in, but I have yet to actually get to any pages. I'm still in like front matter that is supplementary to the book. I also started Letters to a Young Muslim, and I've only read, I think, the first little bit, but interestingly, it's already had some terribly problematic stuff for me that had nothing to do with Islam. So yeah, so interesting. And I started one I haven't talked about before. This is Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century by Kim Fu. This is a short story collection. I've read the first story in here, and it was sort of a little bit sci-fi speculative conversation, totally conversation between two people, one who is running a simulation and the other who is a client who's trying to decide what to go into a simulation of, and they're talking about the rules and that sort of thing. So I think this is going to be speculative-y, weird short stories. I have not started a new ebook. I mentioned I needed one last week, but I've actually been using my time I normally would ebook for doing Duolingo and practicing my Japanese more, because I think I figured out I'm still very much reinforcing the alphabets and stuff, and I'm learning a lot more kanji. So there's still a lot of just learning the textual stuff, but I'm learning around 25 words a week. And if I can keep that up and really push, I kind of want to get that up a little more than 25 words a week. If I can keep that up, I should maybe be conversational by next year. That would be really cool. Japanese is very complicated, but if I could get that kind of baseline of around 1,500 to 3,000 words, you usually can become conversational at that point. So I might know enough to start like actually reading stuff. I would love that. It's been very frustrating that I'm still kind of picking up those children's books and reading through what I phonetically translated of them, and I still can't read really anything in those books. So I would love to actually be able to read stuff. And the other thing is audio. So I did pick up a new audiobook after I finished Oleander Sword, and that was The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. And that's very interesting. It kind of leads me into my watching stuff for the week. My watching stuff, I started Queen Charlotte and completely devoured and watched all of it. This is the Bridgerton series spin-off about the Queen in that world. And putting Marriage Portrait up against Queen Charlotte, there's so many similarities there. And it's really been interesting to kind of see the two young women characters who are married off for political reasons and power. And yeah, I've been loving comparing the two, weirdly. And actually, I kind of like Queen Charlotte better as a character portrayal. So we'll see how Marriage Portrait goes. The other thing that I watched or finished today was Barbecue Showdown Season 2. I, of course, always love cooking competitions, so I don't have really anything to say about this one. It's barbecue and it's a cooking competition, and that's about it. I do really enjoy the judges. They're very chill, and they always have interesting commentary about the competitors, and I especially like the spicy episode. You will know what I mean when you get to it. Yeah, very enjoyable. I think yet again for this week in life updates, I'm just horribly behind on everything. I feel very out of touch with what's going on in BookTube because I have been watching older videos, what little time I have actually been watching BookTube stuff. So I'm like 2 weeks behind on BookTube and haven't even looked or added anything to my watch later queue, so I'm gonna have to do that later after I get this edited. And so I feel like I'm kind of out of the loop of the conversation. What's happening in BookTube land? So let me know if I missed anything prominent from this week. I'm gonna try and go through and add stuff to my watch later. So we will see that later. But my week was kind of busy. I watched a lot of TV late at night and didn't read as much as I would have liked to, but I did read a lot as usual. And I think mainly my week was caught up in stress with work. A lot of work stuff, and also one of my neighbors actually wound up needing to go to long-term care, and she lived alone with her dog, and so it was a situation where the family don't really want to keep her dog, unfortunately, and that's heartbreaking. I am still mentally debating, like, should I just take this dog? And if you don't have the fortitude to lay down your boundaries around that, you will wind up with half a dozen animals when I already have 3 cats. I do not need to get a dog again. But so I was, because I have connections with a lot of the shelters, and I fostered for a couple of different shelters, and have connections with people who have worked at those shelters that I've fostered for, who have since moved on to other shelters. I did wind up helping out with trying to find either someone to take the dog and rehome it, or finding a shelter that would take a dog, because it's a small dog. They're usually very adoptable. Right now, small dogs are very in demand for shelters, but every single place is totally full. So I think we've got the situation sorted, me and another neighbor who were helping out there. And so she was able to get down and get the family with the power of attorney down to a shelter we found that would take the dog in a couple weeks. So until then, my neighbor is gonna keep the dog. Possibly if it gets to be too much for her, she'll let me take the dog for a little while. But yeah, it sounds like just a couple weeks, and then they will have a spot for him at the shelter. So heartbreaking, difficult to make a decision about. So it's still looping through my brain whether do I take this dog or not. But yeah, I think we're gonna let him go to the shelter, and he will hopefully make somebody very happy when he goes through there. He's a really cute little dog. I think I mentioned this is a 3-day weekend, so hopefully it will be kind of quiet, and the weather is really glorious today. It's supposed to warm up a little bit the next couple days, but I spent the whole morning today outside and really was just fantastic. We got a nice breeze. We do not get weather like this in summer, and it's summer. Kids are out of school completely now. I know that's kind of early for some places. Where I grew up in the West Coast, it's usually like mid to late June when kids let out of school, but kids are all out of school now officially as of this week. I think some let out the week before, but everybody's out now. So I'm sure there will be kids outside all over the place. The pool opened today. I think it's definitely going to be warm enough because we've been steady at the 80s for a month almost. Yeah, but it should be a very nice 3-day weekend, and I hope to get a lot of reading done. And that kind of leads me into kind of, I guess, wrapping up, but forecasting for the next little bit. So once we finish up this month, BookTube Prize, the next round is coming up, and I have finally signed on for judging in the next round starting in June. So it'll be 2 months, 6 books reading over those 2 months, assuming I haven't read any of them. Marriage Portrait is one of the possible books that could come up. So I hope I will finish that beforehand, and if so, I'll keep my thoughts for the vlog, which should tell you, I put out a poll on how people want to see things in terms of me wrapping up when I do finish the 2 months of judging, because I have to keep quiet on all the books that I read. And overwhelmingly people said do a vlog. So I think I will do a vlog, and then because some other people were more interested in just a wrap up or a ranking, I will make sure I do a ranking at the end of the vlog so people can just go watch that if they want. So I think that's how I'm going to handle it. We will see if I have the fortitude to maintain that for 2 months. But yeah, if so, we'll have a vlog for the BookTube Prize. So I'm getting ready to now have to be prepared to start that this coming week when the BookTube Prize announcement starts, once I find out what books I'm going to be reading. Yes, that will be very exciting upcoming. And hopefully that will kind of, to my point at the beginning, maybe plug me back into what's going on in BookTube, or I'll feel more tied into what's going on in BookTube. Because I know last year when I participated for the first time in the BookTube Prize, I definitely saw a lot more people coming to check in and see what I was reading to do with the BookTube Prize, and a lot more people who were also judges from the BookTube Prize kind of bantering back and forth about the stuff that they had read after their round finished. So yeah, really, really love the sense of community that comes out with the BookTube Prize. So yes, I'm very much looking forward to starting that in the next week. I think that is it for my reading week and other stuff. Yeah, I think as soon as I get done getting this edited and uploaded, I'm gonna be diving right back into Babel, because we're gonna finish that out today or tomorrow. It's for sure gonna be wrapped up. So that is it for my week. Thank you all so much for watching. Peonies are in full bloom. They're the dumbest plant, because you can't leave them on there. Hibiscuses have really popped up this year. Got another one over here. This one is getting started. This one's always a little bit behind. Looking pretty good. And this one is the new one I planted last year that I thought might have died, but it clearly is coming back. Just a nice deer having lunch in my backyard. sometimes a 16-pound cat is just a small baby who needs love. Huh. He pushed my reading and pillow out of the way, specifically so he could get a spot. A small cat baby. Mm-hmm.